discussion with you and helping the PMI and IIBA and all the communities out there is really something that I'm really passionate about, and helping others as part of being an enterprise agile coach through my podcast, through mentoring. I'm really passionate about helping people and sharing my hard-won knowledge and my failures. So really appreciate you inviting me here today. And today we want to talk a little bit about agile, and this topic keeps coming up, so I want to take a little bit different angle on it and talk about different perspectives in agile and agility, more from the context of the project manager and the BA, but also some of the challenges that we see in organizations moving to agile ways of working, and really what that means for PMs, BAs, and other people who are part of that transformation. So what we want to do is I'll start by jumping in a little bit and talking about when we talk about agile, the big thing is, are we going to be agile, or are we going to be waterfall? Are we going to take this hybrid approach? How are we going to work together? And I think that partially misses the point. So what we really want to look at is not just agile versus waterfall, but what exactly are we going to work on? How are we going to work together? And it doesn't matter if you're agile, waterfall, or hybrid. We see a lot of the gaps that we're going to be talking about today, but any kind of transformation could be a digital transformation, could be just an organizational change. How can we apply our existing skills and knowledge to benefit our teams and organization? So that's what kind of where we're gonna go today. So when we look at agile specifically, there's a certain kind of mindset shift that we need to make in order to be successful in that new environment. So as project managers, as business analysts, as any other kind of professional, we need to be able to think a little bit differently and have that mental agility and change agility in mind, because when it comes down to it, we're really change agents. We help affect organizational change and make it stick, be that through implementing different projects or process changes, organizational changes. That's really what we do. So we need to have that mental agility as well. So when we think about agile ways of working, and I know probably most of you on the call are familiar with Agile, the Agile Manifesto, the values and principles of Agile, but let's look a little bit about that mental shift that we need to make. So some of the things that we need to start thinking about, or shift our thinking, are typically we have this project focus. What's the next thing on the agenda? What's this change that we're about to make that has a defined beginning and end? And start thinking about that in a new way. So while we still may have projects, or your organization might shift to more of a product focus where it's kind of a continuous flow of features and capabilities, not so much a project orientation. But either way, shifting from that project near-term focus to a longer time horizon. So how can we see kind of what's coming up in the future and be able to adapt to that? Because if we have this myopic view of the short term, here's the project that I'm on, and don't really look forward to where's the organization going and will this really help us get there? We're kind of following the trail of breadcrumbs to the wrong cabin. So we want to have that longer term horizon and kind of be able to step back and see the forest, and then zoom back down to the trees, and then zoom out again, see that big picture and understand what's coming up. Because if we know what's coming up and where the organization is going, it might affect how we do that project or how we work currently, and it might really help enable that future, or it might really make that future more difficult. So one of the shifts we need to make is not be myopic and really step back every once in a while and look at what's coming up down the pipe, what's out there next year, 3 years from now, 5 years from now for our organization, where are we headed, and are what we doing today putting us in the right spot to enable that future. So that's that longer term horizon view. Now, Another thing that we often look at, and regardless of whether you're a business analyst or project manager, we often have this habit of trying to learn everything up front. So we have this big design up front. We have all the requirements up front, all the design up front, and then we start executing and testing. And then because of that, we have changes. So instead of creating this big design up front, how can we shift that to let's find out just enough just in time? What do we need to know right now? And then let's do something. Let's take some action because this really helps create that learning environment. So if we do everything up front, we won't get all the information. We won't be right. We know it's not going to be perfect. So why don't we do something so we can learn and then do some more and adjust? It's the Deming plan, do, check, adjust cycle, right? So how do we think smaller and think just enough, just in time? And that's a tough shift for a lot of people to make, but it really enables us to be more agile as an organization. And I mean small a agile, the ability to quickly adapt. The promise of Agile is to turn on a dime for a dime, to be able to pivot very quickly and very cheaply. We can only do that if we shift from that big design up front to what can we do that's just enough so we can learn and then learn some more and adjust some more. The other thing with that is if we do the big design up front, now we have to manage change and kind of control change. Whereas if we take this other mindset, we expect change. We know things are going to change. We know organizations are going to shift, requirements are going to change, the market's going to change. So instead of trying to manage and control change, let's expect change and behave in a way where we can enable us to quickly pivot and change. So part of that is moving away from that big design up front and start thinking incrementally and iteratively so that we can get feedback, adjust, and move forward. But there are other things that we can do to manage if we expect change to happen. So, part of it is, project plans. We build out 3-year project plans in some cases that I've seen, and it's all smoke and mirrors because there's no way that'll reflect reality. It's a good thought exercise, but that plan isn't going to survive the first month. So, how can we think more iteratively, incrementally, and expect change and be able to adapt to it quickly? Next thing we want to do is really shift our focus from documentation to conversations. Now, documentation is still important. You might have different regulatory requirements or different needs in your organization. The documentation still exists, although it might shift to what's just barely sufficient documentation. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint deck. It doesn't have to be a colorful Gantt chart. What's barely sufficient documentation? Because all the power is in the conversation. I'm sure all of you have been in the situation where there's a requirements documentation or some other form of documentation, and either A, people don't read it, or B, they misinterpret it, and it creates gaps. Whereas if we have a conversation, especially in front of a whiteboard, be that in person or virtually, we're able to better align and get on the same page. And that's where the real power comes from. We enable collaboration when we shift from documentation to conversations. So shift your thinking and how could we develop relationships and start talking more and do less of throwing paper over the wall or sending emails back and forth that can be misinterpreted or maybe even not read at all. So that's a fundamental shift that we need to make as well. Another one is shifting from delivery to discovery. So delivery is still important. If we don't deliver, then we really don't make any money and we don't satisfy our customers. But what I'm talking about here is something that relates to that big design up front. When your organization says, here's our project, we want to implement X, go do it, and then you deliver it. That's great, but how do we know that X is the right thing to do? And that's where we get into this discovery phase of how do we find out what the right thing to do is? And there's a lot of things like, design thinking and customer empathy and a lot of the customer centricity going on and experimenting to learn. So there's a lot up front before we actually deliver. Again, delivery is still important, but that discovery piece is just as important. If we don't focus on that discovery, we'll deliver stuff, but is it the right stuff? And if it's not, you're going to spend a lot of time and money on things that customers don't use. I used to work at Capital One a few years ago, and we developed this iPhone app, and it was beautiful. It won all kinds of design awards, and no one wanted it. We wasted a lot of time and money on that app. Now we were able to reuse a lot of that and make it more oriented to something that the customers actually needed. But we spent a lot of time and money needlessly because we didn't do that discovery piece. Someone had a great idea and a bunch of people agreed to it without doing any kind of market research or talking to customers, prototyping, anything like that. We wasted a lot of time and money. So we really want to focus on that discovery piece. And then kind of along with that discovery piece, we often focus on requirements. Here's what we want to build, here's our checklist. Instead, how do we shift that to experiments to learn what's the right thing to do? We don't know that we need all 10 of these requirements. We don't know if those are even the right things. How quickly can we find out if we're right or wrong? Can we run a very cheap and simple experiment just to validate or invalidate our idea or learn something new? So shift from the focus of we know what our customers want, let's give it to them, to what are our customer needs? What are their pain points? How can we best satisfy them? And what kinds of things will satisfy them? And maybe we don't need this huge thing to satisfy them. Maybe this little tiny thing will satisfy them and be much cheaper and easier, and we can move on to something else. So have that experimentation mindset, and you might notice a common theme throughout a lot of these. It's creating that learning opportunity, because we want to create a learning culture so that we can do the right things and identify ways of doing things better. And as change agents, we can enable that learning culture. And there's a lot of power there. And the last piece I'll talk about is moving from planning and analysis to action. Again, planning is still important, analysis is still important, but how do we shift from doing all these plans up front to do a little bit and then move forward? Often we get stuck in analysis paralysis where we're so busy analyzing that nothing actually gets done. So how do we break that down and have that more iterative and incremental mindset where we can do just enough planning and just enough analysis, and maybe we do it more frequently, but we start taking action? Again, going back to that plan, do, check, adjust cycle. We do a little bit of planning, then we do something. We check the results, and then we make adjustments and do a little more planning and more analysis. And it's this virtuous cycle that helps us to constantly adjust and make sure we're on the right course. It's kind of like a GPS or an autopilot on an airplane. It's constantly making these small adjustments to make sure that we stay on the right track and adapt to changing needs. Maybe there's a road closure or traffic, or in an aircraft, maybe it's a storm and you need to adjust your heading. So how can we do just enough planning, know where our destination is, but make just enough planning so that we can kind of adjust along the way? And that's a big mindset shift for a lot of us. So think about these as we go through, and how can we best adapt to this new agile culture and enable a better future for ourselves and for the organization. Let's take a look at another piece here. So one of the things when an organization goes through an agile transformation is, a lot of people say in Scrum, there's no defined role for a business analyst or project manager. There's a lot of concern and angst in a lot of organizations about what do we do with these people in these roles? What they do is still valuable and important, but what do we do with them? Do we keep those roles? Do we shift something? What happens here? And a lot of organizations take different approaches in what they do. Some of them keep those existing roles. Some of them are basically a title change. Some of them shift to new ways of working. So let's look at what are those opportunities, and how you might be able to apply your skills and knowledge in a different way. So we have built a lot of different skills and abilities in what we do. So let's take a look at what skills do you currently have? So in your current role, what kind of skills, knowledge, abilities do you have that you apply today? So let's use the chat and start throwing out some thoughts on what skills or abilities or knowledge do you have today that you use in your current role to benefit your organization or your team. So put it in the chat. You can send it to everyone. But let's start thinking about what kind of skills you have today. I see SQL coming up, collaboration, technical skills, facilitation, that's a real big one. IT, that domain knowledge, right? Technical knowledge. Operations, yeah, knowing the business side as well, the processes, the players, coordination between business and technical, customer needs understanding, yeah, understanding their needs, risk management, that's another big one. Assessment, facilitation, a lot of facilitation, which is good. Data and analytics, business knowledge, coordination skills, right? All these skills are really critical, and they're not going away. Organizations still need these skills. What a lot of organizations do is they look at these skills or they focus more on the tasks often of, I create a project plan, I create a requirements document, I do X, Y, and Z, and then they take what we do and kind of spread that out among the agile roles. If I do facilitation, well, maybe that's the role of a Scrum Master. If I write requirements, maybe that's the role of a product owner or something like that. But there's fundamental skills and abilities here. It's not just a task that we do. There are these core skills and abilities that really enable us to do something great in our organization, to make things happen. A lot of times these things are invisible, but when we do them, things just happen. And when we fail to do them, bad things happen. So these skills are still needed. Maybe we could apply them in a different context. And for a lot of organizations, people shift to different roles to do that. So part of that is looking at how we use these skills, the problem solving skills, the communication skills, even leadership, right? A lot of project managers and even BAs have to use this leadership skills to make sure people are aligned, coordinated, understand what the value is, have that political savviness where we know how to talk to different people and adjust our communication style. All these things are really important. So how do we use these in a different way? So when we look at how we apply these different skills and knowledge, you can apply them in different roles. So if your organization says, hey, we're not going to have project manager titles or business analyst titles anymore, what happens in these organizations? And a lot of times there's several different options. So one of the options is to shift your role title to developer. And by developer, I don't mean software engineer. I mean a team member like in a Scrum team. The Scrum Guide recently came out with a new version where they don't call it the development team, they just say developer as a role, but that can be team business analysts, can be UX designer, quality engineer, software engineer, and anyone else who is needed to help get that team to a valuable, workable, high quality solution. So there's an opportunity there for us based on our knowledge, skills, ability to shift into one of those team member roles on the team as a developer, or even beyond that, a team leader, a people leader, where we're able to coach and mentor others for them to bring out their best and help the organization in that way. So part of a team leader's role in an agile environment or people leader's role is to create the environment where the team could succeed. And that includes mentoring and coaching individuals, removing organizational issues and impediments. There's change leadership there. There's a lot of pieces there. So there's another option there where a lot of project managers and BAs either move to a team member or even to some kind of people leader where they're helping create the right environment where teams could do the best work of their lives. Now, in other areas, a lot of organizations can look at the project manager role and say, okay, hey, project managers, congratulations, you're all Scrum Masters now. And there are some skill similarities there, right? There's facilitation, coaching, mentoring, there's getting team alignment. So a lot of the skills that we have that you listed here, we can apply in this different role. And frankly, Scrum Master is one of the fastest growing roles and highest in demand roles in the country right now. If we look at a lot of the statistics, there's 30 to 40% role growth and a lot of growth opportunity beyond the Scrum team role. There's a lot of things going on there. And the Scrum Master is really that change agent, not only for the team, but for the organization. So we just need to apply different thinking in this role and allow the team to self-organize. So, there's some shifts here we need to make from kind of leading and directing actions, sometimes as a project manager or BA, to helping the team to self-organize, helping them to understand really what's needed, helping them with the skills and knowledge they need to be able to say, hey, here's how we should do this. So allowing them to problem solve, building them up, because that helps the organization as a whole. And then even beyond that, a lot of organizations are using a scaling method like SAFe. So there are different types of roles that are similar to a program manager outside the team, where you're looking at a team of teams, and often that's called a release train engineer or Uber Scrum Master or whatever term your organization uses. There's a lot of growth potential there as well, where you're seen more as that almost like a program manager looking across multiple teams, making sure teams are aligned, making sure that they have the information, skills, knowledge to be successful, creating that right environment. And that's something that's really powerful. And that's where a lot of organizations fail. They fail to set up that right environment for the teams to succeed. And then often, especially for business analysts, they say, hey, we're not going to have BAs anymore. BAs, you're all product owners. And the product owner is really the person responsible for the value that's delivered by the team. So we're able to use a lot of those same skills, facilitation, visioning, alignment, understanding customer needs, domain knowledge, a lot of things that everyone here listed on what skills are we using today, just in a different context. So as a BA or even project manager, a lot of times you're an influencer. You influence the stakeholders or business owners to make decisions. Well, as a product owner, you are the decision maker. So you have to work with stakeholders, take their input, but at the end, the final decision is yours. So it's more responsibility. So you might have to partner with other people and kind of herd the cats of the stakeholders and make sure there's alignment there and work on priorities, and most importantly, be able to say no to people. So there's a little bit of a shift there, but again, we can use our existing skills and knowledge. And some organizations even have above that product owner, product managers, where usually they're a little bit more outward facing. So the product owner typically works kind of with customers and with the team, or with stakeholders and the team, whereas a product manager is typically a little more outward facing, looking at what's going in on the market with external customers, really understanding what's going on with our competitors, and then a little bit internal where they might do some kind of road mapping and visioning. So it's a little bit higher level. Often product owners report to product managers, but it might look different in your organization. So there's a lot of opportunities if your organization says, we're going to shift roles here. There's many opportunities and even many beyond these. We could start to see how we can shift some of our skills and abilities that we have today, just use them in a different way and have that mindset shift where we're able to think a little bit differently, but be successful and help the team and organization to be successful as we make this kind of transition. So let's look at one of the roles real quick. So a Scrum Master, because often, again, project managers shift to this role. And I've known a lot of BAs who have shifted to the role as well and been very successful. So they're really the team coach. And one of the things that, if you haven't used Agile practices before, as a coach, you need to kind of know the rules of the game. So part of being able to seamlessly shift into this project manager or a Scrum Master role is to have that understanding of the role, really understand the values and principles behind it, and be able to kind of use that as your North Star or lighthouse to direct your thinking and direct your guidance and help the teams to self-organize. So kind of shift from directing to enabling and making sure that people understand where are we going, how should we be thinking about things a little bit differently, challenging each other, helping people to really grow and develop, helping people to speak up and collaborate and bring people together. So again, a lot of skills that we have today, but you have to layer it with that fundamental foundational knowledge of agile practices and principles. And quite frankly, a 2-day certified Scrum Master training isn't going to cut it. That's like the bare minimum foundation of here's the rules of the game. You really have to practice and make it part of your being in order to be successful as a Scrum Master and as a change agent to enable the agility on the team and the organization. Next role we want to talk about just very briefly is a product owner. And again, they're focused on the value because they're responsible for the value that's delivered by the team. Their kind of neck is on the line because the team has a fixed cost and they have to make sure they prioritize things that will deliver more value than the team costs, obviously. And they want to do what's best for the organization. So part of that is, determining the strategy and what does that competitive landscape look like and how do we create a vision? And again, they might work with other stakeholders, product managers, and others to form these things, but they need this in order to align the team and help the team to understand where are we going, why that's important, create a compelling case for why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important, and what does success look like so that the team could say, well, if that's where we're going, here's the best way to get there. And here's how we can learn along the way. So this is a very pivotal role as well, and a role where it often needs a lot of help and support. So one of the things that I talk about when I refer to a product owner, there are kind of 4 quadrants that I think of. And the first one is business analysis. And again, not the role title, but more the skill. So how do I understand the business case? How do I understand what the customer pain points and needs are? How do I understand value? And then take all that and kind of break it down into smaller pieces, this decomposition, and identify ways to learn along the way and crystallize that in people of here's where we're going, here's why it's important, and here's how we're going to get there step by step and iterate on it. The next quadrant is project management. Because a lot of people say, let's just create this project, let's work in an agile way, and it'll be done when it's done. Well, that often doesn't work in reality because we have other stakeholders to work with. Maybe we have a product and we need to work with our marketing team and they need some lead time for the campaign. We have learning and development, might have to train our call center reps or our external customers or develop documentation. We can't just say it'll be ready when it's ready. So a lot of that project management competency comes in helping us to understand planning and understand estimating and when will things be done and what kind of skills do we need to be successful here? How do we overcome dependencies? How do we address some of these risks? And a lot of those are gaps within a product owner and within the team. And that's something where, as a product owner or someone supporting a product owner, we can really help out. Then we have the product management component, really looking at that competitive landscape and our customer needs and determining what's the best thing to do and how will we put that in the market and what's our medium for releasing these things and how will it be used and what's a lifetime cost and all these different things of really doing the right thing. And then the 4th component is really around leadership. How do we create this compelling vision? How do we align people so that we're all headed and rowing the same direction? And without that alignment, it gets really dicey and you generally don't get there at all, or you don't get there as fast as you could. So a lot to think about when we talk about leadership and product ownership, because oftentimes one person doesn't have all these skills and abilities. And we'll reflect on that in a bit. So let's talk a little bit about some of the gaps and challenges. So let's say your organization doesn't kind of force a role shift. Certainly, there might be opportunities for you to kind of raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'd like to explore this role." But let's say they continue the current roles and go forward with an agile transformation. And let's talk a little bit about how you, in your current role, could really help enable success around this agile transformation and going forward. So when we talk about an agile transformation, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? There's a lot of pain, a lot of risks there, a lot of things that could go wrong. So, some of the things like that misalignment in vision, where one team says X is a priority, another team says Y is a priority, but both are needed to do X and Y. There's a lot of people going in different directions. If we don't have that aligned vision across the organization, or at least across a team of teams, we're not going to be successful. We're going to waste a lot of time and money and probably never be able to deliver what we need to deliver to satisfy our customers. Then we have the area of dependencies and risks, like we talked about before. So at an organizational level, there might be dependencies between teams, between different business areas. We might even have a hybrid approach where some teams are using agile ways of working, some teams are using a traditional approach. And how do we get them to work together? How do we look at the overall organizational risks? So often in agile, we look at the team level stuff. I need team A to do this. Let's just work it out between us. But there might be bigger dependencies and risks across the organization. And a lot of times those things are missed. So as a change agent in the organization, that's something where we may be able to help as well. Let's jump back into this one though. I mentioned a change agent, organizational change. One of the biggest things that we see when we go through a digital transformation or agile transformation is the change doesn't stick, right? When push comes to shove or when we're up against a wall, we fall back on old ways of working. So as change agents, as BAs, as project managers, we're used to helping people to adapt to change. So how can we help them through the change curve? And that includes creating an awareness of the change, help them to really want the change and understand what's in it for them, gain knowledge about what is this change and what does it mean, enable them to be able to be successful in the change, and even reinforce and reward the new behaviors so that that change sticks. So as an organizational change agent, that's somewhere where we can help the organization as well, making sure that we make that positive change, everyone's on board, and that that change sticks. Two more pieces are the bigger picture. So again, we're on a team following the trail of breadcrumbs, but we don't really see that bigger picture. And oftentimes that leads us to falling off a cliff. So we need people who can pull their heads up every once in a while, look around, make sure we're headed in the right direction and all aligned still, and then dive back down into the details. So let's have someone with the ability to see that bigger picture and raise their hand if we're starting to go off course and help the organization stay aligned and aligned to the organizational imperatives and where the market is going and everything like that. And then finally, areas outside the team. So again, as a team member, I'm just looking at for the delivery side of things. How do I get things done? But I'm not looking at compliance, legal, marketing, these other areas maybe outside of technology. If we're not all aligned, there are going to be problems. And as project managers, a lot of us are used to that. We're seeing these missing stakeholders and missing pieces and make sure we pull them in and make sure that they're aligned. So there are a lot of opportunities here for us to be able to jump in and help not only the change to be successful, but help the teams and organization to be successful. So some of the things that we can do if we look at the Scrum Master and Scrum team, assuming you have Scrum in your organization, doesn't really matter what methodology or framework you're using, but helping out the team. So if we have smaller teams that are working in agile ways of working or even teams of teams, there's some things that we can do by applying our skills and knowledge. We can do things like coaching and mentoring, right? We have certain skills and knowledge and ability to help people and support people as project managers and BAs. We should be able to coach others. And that could be coaching software engineers and quality engineers, Could even be coaching the Scrum Master or product owner, but providing that coaching and mentoring so that they have the knowledge they need to be successful, and we help them overcome some of the challenges that they may be facing. Impediment removal. So typically, if it's a Scrum team, the Scrum Master is there to help the team resolve impediments. They might not be the one to resolve it, but they help the team to resolve that impediment. And often they don't have the organizational view or span to understand how to solve some of these impediments. So often a project manager or BA will jump in and help remove a lot of these impediments. And an impediment is anything that's slowing down or stopping progress, anything that's preventing the team from being as successful as possible. And we could all help there with our domain knowledge, our knowledge of stakeholders, our technical knowledge. We're very good at being able to help solve a lot of those problems. And that's a big benefit for the team. Next, we have that, again, domain knowledge. So being able to share what we know, our kind of hard fought wisdom that we've gained for working through the organization and other organizations. How can we share that knowledge and make sure other people have that knowledge? Because by spreading that out, we enable others to make good decisions, and we're not the bottleneck anymore. So sharing that domain knowledge is very useful as well, and really even overcoming dependencies. So with that impediment removal, with that coaching and mentoring, with that domain knowledge, we're able to see some of those dependencies and make sure conversations are taking place, and we're aligned on what are our priorities, who's going to do what by when, something that a lot of project managers are used to having those conversations about. So how do we overcome those dependencies and even get ahead of the curve and identify those a little sooner? Hey, if we're going to do X, we need this team and this team, and we'll need this person to weigh in on that. And this person might be against it. So we need to involve them early and have that conversation. And we need support from this person. So a lot of that is really powerful. And then cross-team communication. So being a valued communicator and making sure that there's alignment there. And when one team is at a certain point, making sure we have those conversations about dependencies, about impediments, about anything else that's needed here. So these are all things that we can do in our current roles using our current skills to really help and support at a team level or help the people who are helping the teams. And this could be a Scrum Master, it could be a people manager, could be a team lead, whoever, but how do we best help and support the team in our current role? A lot we could do here. Same with the product owner. So if we look at the product owner role, we talked before about there's a lot going on there, right? They have these different dimensions they have to look at. So we can help them with visioning. How do we articulate this compelling vision of the future that makes people want to say, man, I want to be part of that effort or project, or man, if we're successful here, this is going to be awesome. And just get people excited about a vision. What's our burning platform? What's a compelling vision? And a lot of times as BAs and project managers, we often help articulate that vision. So that's somewhere where we can definitely help product managers and product owners to craft and create that vision and share that vision out. Organizational alignment, again, similar to with the team, but making sure that the product people understand here's where we need to go, here's where we might have a misalignment in priorities, and frankly, do our priorities align to the organizational priorities? Risk management is something we often forget. We just keep moving forward and don't have that big picture forward thinking view so that we can see risks coming up and do something about them. What can we do to mitigate or reduce the possibility of this risk happen? Or, how do we own a risk and do something with it? Or if we accept a risk, how do we create that transparency around it? Creating roadmaps, going back to that planning and predictability. How do we create a roadmap so that we know where we're going and what might be coming up? That's something that a lot of product people have struggles with. So that might be something where they can partner with a project manager or someone else who has strong skills in that area and help them put together some kind of roadmap so we know where we're going and what kind of outcomes that means. That goes back to that planning and predictability. So when we say we're going to launch Project X, okay, well, if we're going to launch it around here based on what we can deliver now, we're going to need to involve marketing and we're going to need to involve legal at this point and this point. So help them be able to predict and plan things out so that we're all aligned and successful. And then that awareness of future projects. So I was working on a large initiative for an organization, and it took probably a little over a year to create this capability. And then about a year later, we enabled a different capability. We had to undo half of what we did previously. If someone had that big picture thinking and saw what we were going to do in the future, we would have created this other capability much differently. And we would have been able to enable that future ability if we had known it was coming up. So have that forward view of where we're going as an organization, what might be coming up is going to be key to make sure that we're doing things the right way, with the right picture in mind, so we can enable the right kind of growth and enable the direction that we're going. And then finally, communication coordination. Again, a lot of things that we talked about in our existing skills, coordination between teams, making sure people are communicating, sharing the story, just making sure that everyone is aligned and communicating and talking is going to be key and pivotal as well. And then from an organizational standpoint, there's a lot going on here as well, both from the transformation standpoint and after the transformation to make sure it's sustaining. So that change leadership that we talked about. How do we enable change in the organization and really make it stick? And again, that might include everything from some kind of awareness campaign, communication, some kind of presentations involving learning and development, holding training. How do we reinforce this? What kind of reward system do we have, both on an individual and an organizational level? So there's a lot in change leadership that we can do to help people along the change curve and really benefit our organization. Making sure that we're aligned. And I talked before about organizational goals. So at the team level, making sure the teams are aligned, but then holistically, are we aligned to our organizational goals? So looking at the organization's annual goal, 3-year goal, 5-year goal, maybe 10-year plans, and saying, are we aligned? And is what we're doing today enabling that future state? And there'll be adjustments along the way, but that big picture thinking and alignment is going to be key to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction and enabling the right kind of future for our organization. Another piece is creating that clarity. So again, with that change leadership and alignment, well, what does X mean? When we do this project, why are we doing it? And what do we see as a potential outcome? So helping create that clarity among teams of teams, among the organizational leaders of why we're doing things and what does success look like? What outcomes are we trying to achieve? And is this really the right thing to do at this time? Just really questioning things and making sure that we're all doing the right things and we're all clear on what this means. There's a lot going on there with that piece, and it's something we're used to. And along with that, it's creating that transparency. So all along the way, encouraging people to be transparent about what we're doing, what state things are in. Oftentimes today we have status reports, and a lot of status reports use red, amber, green, or red, yellow, green status. And a lot of times there's fear in the organization where I can't show my project as red, or I can't show it as yellow because I'm going to get beat up. So how do we create that culture of safety so that we can be transparent about things? A lot of times today we have a watermelon status where on the outside it looks green, but once you cut it open, it's red. So how do we create a culture where, hey, if something is behind, we are able to raise our hand early and say, hey, I'm concerned about this. And the leadership supports that and says, I'm glad you brought this up. How can we help? Let's work together. So enabling that kind of culture where we can be transparent. And as change agents, we can make that happen. So that's a big part of the role as well. So really what we're talking about today is how can we use our current skills and abilities either to make a role shift and be successful in that shift, or even stay where we are today and use our existing skills, maybe grab a few new skills and knowledge nuggets, but how can we help the teams, organization, product owners, how can we help us all be successful? And that's really what it's all about. As professionals, as organizational change agents, we want to make sure that we're doing something valuable and applying our existing skills, knowledge, as facilitation, domain knowledge, risk management, all these different pieces, finding those gaps. So what I would recommend is as you go throughout your day, just keep a notepad and start writing down some gaps or impediments or organizational issues or team issues that you see. It's kind of your coaching plan or organizational growth plan. And you might come across one after you review it, maybe once or twice a week, review that list that you've come up with and say, here's somewhere where I could help. I see this as a pain point and I could provide value here. Let me go do this. And as you do that, you'll start building skills and knowledge, and you'll start building a reputation of being someone who can really help it and provide a lot of value. And that enables a virtuous cycle of growth and change and enabling others to do the same. And that's where we want to be. Create the kind of organization where people can do the best work of their lives, and we can make that happen. So I encourage you all to really look at what we're doing and what the gaps are and how can you help your organization using your existing skills. So with that, appreciate everyone's time. We do have some time to take some questions that I'm happy to answer. So you can put them in chat or you could take yourself off mute. But as Bobby mentioned, I do have a podcast that's available on iTunes and Google Play and everywhere fine podcasts are listened to that really focuses on not just business analysis, but product ownership, product management, communication, leadership, facilitation. So if you find something useful there, feel free to listen to it. And I'd love to hear if you got any value out of that. So with that, I'd like to open the floor to any questions. And I see, Bobby, you had a question.
Yeah, Dave, we have state representation here in our audience, and I apologize I didn't let you know in advance, but with state governments, not just state governments or even local governments, I'm seeing that agility in an organization should allow for empiricism. So how can government entities still be organizationally be agile, although they may not be a lot of room in the budget or resources, people resources for empirical testing? What's paint us a little bit of a picture on how to address that?
Yeah, great question. And frankly, Agile in government is a big topic right now. If you look at any kind of Agile conference, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a talk on Agile in government. And little by little, they're learning new ways of working. So it's really not about budget. So you talked about empiricism. And the pillars of empiricism are transparency, inspection, adaption. So how can we as a team or as an organization be more transparent about what we're doing, even between teams or outward focus, and then use that transparency to be able to inspect what's happening and then adapt. And none of that requires budget. It just requires someone to make sure we have safety enough to be transparent and then really look at what's going on. Look at, as I mentioned before, that organizational challenges, impediments, things like that. What's going on here as I look at all this data and we're transparent and we're having communications, here's all the pain we're feeling. What could we do about that? And really, Agile is just about a mindset shift. It's not about hiring new people. It's just how do we think about things a little bit differently? That light bulb moment that I had early on in the presentation of moving from X to Y, moving from that big design up front to how do we plan a little bit more incrementally and how do we work in different ways? How do we enable more communication? Now in government, they do have certain rules and regulations where we need to fill out the TPS report 5 times and we have to do X, Y, and Z, and that's our process. But in a lot of organizations, in government organizations, they're starting to challenge some of that thinking. You may or may not be able to challenge it, but just really start thinking, what's the what's the minimum valuable thing we can do here? And can we modify anything to make it just barely sufficient and eliminate some of the overhead? What it really takes are people who are change agents who can start to instill the safety and ability to really just question, why are we doing things and is it truly valuable? Creating that big picture is a big piece of it. I recall I was working with this coach who was working with the government agency, and they were chugging along fine. But what he did is he went in and looked at the different departments and kind of followed what they do, and he created this value stream map. And he showed the leadership there of what all the things that we're doing, what the wait times and queues were, what was valuable, what was not value added. That was a big light bulb moment. They were able to basically do all the stuff that they were doing, but have even more outcomes, more valuable outcomes quicker because they had this holistic view. A lot of times the leaders are too high up to see everything going on, and the ground level workers are too far in the weeds. We need someone who can kind of see that picture, zoom in and out, and be able to see it for what it is. And how do we just figure out different ways of working? So it's really not about money. It's just about changing our thinking. And how could we do that little by little and find out what's truly valuable? How can we best serve our customers? And if you're a for-profit business, serving your customers in a way that's sustainable and makes the organization money, or government, how do we best serve our constituents and customers from that standpoint while still adhering to any kind of rules and regulations? It's a little bit of a balancing act, but if you have someone who's able to look throughout the organization, kind of dive down into the weeds and then pick their heads up, that's a big way of getting that ball rolling. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely, Dave. So it really starts with culture and mindset. So think about those things first before even going deep down in the weeds. So yeah, that really answers my question. Thank you for sharing. The other question I have is that on the first slide, I'm kind of tripped actually with a longer time horizon, which to me, in my mind, is counterintuitive to agility. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so when we say a longer time horizon, it's more about looking at what are our organizational goals for the future, not just for the next quarter, maybe not even just for the next year, but what's coming down the road? Where are we headed as an organization? And then look beyond your project and say, first of all, is this project, if we're implementing X, this capability, maybe it's changing a phone center where we're enabling our customers to be more self-service, through the internet or through an IVR or something like that. Is it where we're going at as an organization? And if we're going to change something far down the road, are we enabling that change, or are we going to have to undo something, or are we inhibiting that change? So really it's all about picking your head up and saying, what's farther down the road? What you don't want to do is that headlight driving. So imagine you're driving on a dark road at night, and you're trying to go fast, but you can only see as far as your headlights, right? If you don't turn on your high beams and see that curve coming up ahead, you're going to be in big trouble. So how do we turn on our high beams or install street lights along the way so that we don't have an accident? And that's really what I'm talking about. Focus on what you're doing now, but kind of have one eye on the future to understand, are we going in the right direction? And are we enabling that future that we want for the organization?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I actually had that experience driving very late at night coming down south here this past weekend. So being able to see the forest from the trees is really what you're saying. And I just love that. I don't have any more questions. I apologize. We have 2 minutes left. I'll use this time to turn over to Pam, our chapter president, and Pam for her closing remarks.
And Bobby, if I can interrupt 1 second, I do see a question that just came up. Do you
Okay.
have any tips for helping larger teams greater than 10 to incorporate Agile principles? So I'll try and answer this super quick. Often we try and say, let's limit the size of the team, and that's really to enable better communication and collaboration. If you have a really large team, it's hard to be able to collaborate. And often when you have a larger team, they'll kind of break out into silos. So with larger teams, it is a challenge, but really making things visible helps. And also things like pairing. So, if you have two software engineers or a software engineer and a tester, and they can pair together, that really helps to create alignment in rotating pairs so that everyone knows what everyone else is working on, and we're moving together, and we're all helping each other and collaborating. So that's one quick thing that you can start thinking about.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Go ahead, Pam.
Thank you, David. Thank you for spending your time today with us here in Central Illinois and probably spread out a little bit farther. I know Bobby is even in the southern states. So thank you. For those of you who have joined, I hope you join us for some more of our Lunch and Learns. We have a great program. We also have our monthly chapter meetings as well. So check out our website, pmi-cic.org. Also, if you're interested in volunteering with the chapter, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, and we have all kinds of roles. Like Bobby said, we're looking for someone to own these. We're also looking for people to help out in all different ways, whether it's through marketing or helping with finances or education. We have lots of opportunities for you to get involved. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye
everyone.
now. Thanks again, David.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.